Hi everyone, I'm Sosteen. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about how to digitize historical embroidery. And to do this, I'm going to start by opening up Palette version 11. Palette is the baby lock version of the digitizing program. This is what I use. Full disclosure, I am a baby lock ambassador, but honestly, it's such a great program, so I would not recommend it if I did not really think it did the job and did it well. So first I open up this program, and as you'll see, we have basically our area for digitizing here in white. You can change the size by going to design settings. I personally use a 10 needle, so that's the one I click here, but if you use the one single needle like one of these, you can click there and change your hoop size there as well. I usually start on whatever it is my largest hoop size is. For me, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go to 14 by 7 and 7/8, which is the largest hoop that I personally enjoy embroidering with. Okay, so now I'm going to do this. I am going to have it be horizontal instead of vertical like it is currently. Okay, now I'm going to load up the image. There's many places you can get historical images from, but for me personally, I got this one at Cooper Hewitt. I also get them from the Metropolitan Museum of Art and really just Pinterest in general. So I go to my desktop, and today we're going to work on a pocketbook. So let's see, this is the pocketbook that we're working on. I don't want this one. I think I'm going to start on the back here. Excellent. So I open this up, and you'll notice that this image really comes up already to a size that is predetermined. I am going to enlarge this. So to enlarge it, I'm going to zoom out in the bottom right corner there, and I'm going to sort of just enlarge it a little bit. And this one brings the design into focus. I may end up shrinking this a little bit after I'm done, but this is a good place to start. Now that I like the sizing and the location, which is firmly inside of this embroiderable area, I'm going to click outside of the box. If at any point I want to modify this, I can literally go click this, and that'll let me change up the image size or rotation or anything like that. Okay. Now I'm going to get started with the digitizing. For the most part, I use one of 3 stitches. For the lines, I usually go to here under shapes, and I go to this place where it says open curve, and then I either use a zigzag stitch or I use a stem stitch. And you can see I literally just use this to kind of draw out the curves as I need to. And I'm just drawing here. I'm usually just using the little keypad on my computer. If at any point I mess up, say I put a couple of stitches here by accident, I can literally right click and that removes the last stitch or the last point that I just dropped. So I can literally go back and go all the way down, or I can finish it by double clicking and that'll draw that line for me. This is obviously not what I want, so I'm going to delete this. The other tool that I use is this one. This is the closed curve. If I use the closed curve, I often go and remove the outline, and instead of the fill stitch, I usually go with satin stitch. You can go to sewing attributes and determine the angle that you want the satin stitching to be in, and then you can literally just draw your shape. Now if I want to put a sharp point somewhere, I put one point down and I put another point really close to it, and that gives me a sharp point. And then you can change it up and the angle by going into the select point tool. And then once it's in there, you can add direction lines, change up your direction lines, do whatever you need to make the angles of your stitching exactly as you want to be. And I usually go up on my stitch density to about 440. Now, that was obviously just for practice too. So I'm going to go back to my regular select, and then I'm going to delete that. And then let's get started. Now to start, I'm going to start on the outline there, and I'm going to go to Open Curve Line Tool. I'm going to zoom into about 300, and here you can see that the stitching here looks like a tambour stitch. I'm probably going to try to do this as a chain stitch. I'm going to make the run time 3, and I'm going to make this as small as possible. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now that I know that I like the way that that looks, I'm going to delete that. I'm going to go to color and go into a different one. I usually pick rayon because they have a lot of different color choices, and I pick a green that is reminiscent of the one on screen. So I'm probably going to pick this one. And I usually like to start in somewhere around here. I'll probably start at this corner right here and then just go all the way around. So I'm just going to draw points along the center of the curve. And I've done this a while, so I know how the curvature follows along. So I kind of am just dropping points as I see fit. You can go closer together, further apart, whatever you feel is the right thing. So when I get to this corner, I just go down and then I continue. Again, if I press or put down some wrong points, I right click and I can literally go back to where I was, and then I'm going to continue dropping points. Okay, so now that we've actually finished this curve, you can see how this whole thing is laid out. Now I am going to do this bow at the corner. And if you actually look at the pattern, it looks like the bows in the corners were embroidered first, and then the curling swirl edge was embroidered on top of it. So what I'm going to do is actually do this, draw these, and then I'm going to move the layers so that the bow is actually below. And you'll notice that this chain stitch doesn't look quite as wide. The way that this particular chain stitch stitches out, it actually looks more like tambour when it's actually stitched out than on the computer screen. I know you're just gonna have to believe me on it because you're not gonna see the embroidered version for this, but you can also use a stem stitch if you'd like to mimic tambour as well. Oftentimes I just don't even try to mimic tambour. I just, I understand that that's just how things are, and I just turn it into satin stitch and stem stitch. But in this case, this particular tambour was wide enough that I thought it could actually handle the chain stitch that I wanted to do here. Okay, now let's do this particular strawberry right here. I'm going to switch over to this tool, which is the close curve, and I am going to remove the outline and have only the stem stitch. I plan on starting with these leaves over here, this stem, and then go to the strawberry itself. So I usually start with the leaves because it looks like the leaves were embroidered first and the strawberry on top of it. So to do this, I'm going to pick a dark green for the leaf, and if you look at the directionality of the stitches, it kind of goes this way. I'm going to also do the same with my stitches so I can kind of mimic the original. And then I'm going to draw this leaf out like so. And then I'm actually going to cut it off right here so that I can make the green go on top of it. I'm going to click that, and I'm going to change the color to a dark green. I'm going to go to sewing attributes and do the density to 140. And then, since I'm just going to do all the dark greens at once, so I'm going to go back and do this one next. Again, at the corners, I put 2 points relatively close to each other, but not on top of each other. And I'm going to do this leaf right here. Same way, kind of trace out the outline. I'm currently at 158%, and then for me, I think this is fine for this particular design. But if a design gets more detailed, I often go at 300. Now I'm going to select each of these and change the angles of the stitches so that they match the original better. So I'm going to change that one. I'm going to change this one. I'm going to go to this top left and press the I button, which makes that entire set of colors invisible. This lets me do the next color without being impeded by the original. So let's start with this little piece of green right here. I'm going to change the color to be a nice neon-y green. And I'm going to draw that shape. And then you'll notice that there's some shading here, and I'll show you how I deal with that. So I've drawn that shape. I'm going to select it with my arrow. So then I go to this leaf, and I'm actually going to change this angle to be closer to what it was in the original. Then I get rid of the undersewing, which is the stitching that they do before the final layer. And then I press feather edge. And what that does is it actually makes it a little funky like that, as you see there. You'll notice that you get this little line, and that's the undersewing. If you're having some trouble making that not show up, you may have to change the angle of the stitching, and it may be different from the original, but at the same time it's the idea of having the shading, and I personally prefer it over that stitched line, so that's what I often do. So I'm just kind of playing with it right now to find a way for that line not to show up, and I'm seeing that there really isn't too much I can do about it. It really just wants to show up, so that one's a little bit better. So just to put this into perspective, I'm going to make the color underneath the darker green visible for a moment, and now you can see how it would look, and you kind of get that shading just like the original. So I'm going to make both of these invisible again, and I'm going to do the other 3 leaves. Now that I've done that, I'm going to make everything visible for a second so you can take a better look. Now you'll notice that it's actually, I made it a little bit too green. I'm going to make it a little bit more yellowy, I think. But you're getting the idea. It's not a perfect science. It really isn't one for this. We're just trying to capture the mood of the original, right? So what I'm going to do is go to the strawberry now. So I'm going to make all of this invisible so it's not in the way. And I'm going to start by again grabbing the closed curve, and I'm going to start on the red, that lovely bright red. So I'm just going to draw this, and I'm going to give a relatively generous margin so that the pink has some room to really shade out properly. So you'll notice I'm going way over the area of the pink because the pink is going to go on top and overlap it. So I'm going to go to sewing attributes, and change the angle. Actually, I'm going to change the color too to make it be a little darker. And I'm going to get rid of the feathered edge, and I'm actually going to add the undersewing again. Then I'm going to make it invisible. And then I'm going to do the next part. So for this, I'm going to just kind of follow the curvature. And I'm just going to kind of go the same place that I see the strawberry lines. Now, looks like there's a little bit of kind of yellowy pale green at the tip. Maybe the strawberry isn't fully ripe yet. And I'm going to, again, click this, change up the color, go to sewing attributes, remove the undersewing, and then feather the edge. Whoops, wrong edge. I'm going to feather the other edge. Now for this one, you can actually make this more feathered or less feathered depending on how you want it to look. So I'm going to actually make it feathered a bit deeper like that. And then let's take a quick look to see how it looks all together. See, already it's looking more like a strawberry. So I'm going to make both of these invisible now. And I'm actually going to zoom in here for the tip. I think 250 ought to do it. Okay, for this one, I'm going to go and just draw out this tip. Again, giving myself a little bit of a margin so that I can change up the edging. So click on that. I'm going to make it this kind of like peachy pink because it's the lightest. And then I am going to decrease the feathering to about 0.1 inches so that it's a little bit fuller. Okay, now let's see the whole thing together and change it and edit it now. Okay, so see how it's a little bit awkward looking right there? I'm going to shave off some of the pink here so that it looks better there. So I'm just going to move this here inwards and then move this one outward so it correlates with that tip better, and then move this one out a little bit. I'm going to change the angle of the strawberries there. Again, these are little nitpicky details, but it kind of helps me. Now that I'm done with all that, I'm going to make this all invisible again. I know. And then I'm going to start drawing the strawberry seed. Now the strawberry seeds, they look like a combination of brown and yellow, but my bet is that's just the shading of the flash. What I'm going to do is go to open curve, get rid of the outline, and then draw each seed individually. And sometimes it won't take. Let's see if it will. Oh my god, that is so tiny. Okay, can I increase the density of that? No, it's actually the way it is. So the seeds, I'm afraid, are just a little bit too small. I may end up having to French knot those or just do them myself by hand after. But let me try this one. Some of these seeds are in fact bigger. So for those, I might actually be able to. Yep, I can do those. Look how tiny these seeds are. I can imagine how much of a nightmare this is for anyone who has a machine that doesn't cut. But really, my machine does, and I really do embroider for like my machine. And that's really how I suggest everyone do it. Like embroider for your personal project, you know. You can go crazy trying to embroider for somebody else and figure out the nuances of somebody else's machine. So just embroider for yourself. Make sure you yourself love your project. So I'm gonna draw some of these seeds in, knowing full well that it's gonna be a nightmare for my machine to sew up. I'm making some of these seeds a little bit bigger than they actually are so that my machine has a chance of embroidering them. Like, it's just the reality of digitizing for an actual machine versus hand. Because if you were doing this by hand, I bet you could do it actually faster than I'm actually digitizing it. I know these seeds are kind of in this yellow brownish. I'm starting to wonder if maybe they were brown and yellow sewn together, so like 2 stitches per seed. It's entirely possible. I think I'm gonna make these dark brown though because I think it'll look better when you actually stitch them out. Again, my opinion, not fact, just but that's what I do. Like I just embroider for how I want things, not necessarily because they're historically accurate or because they're exactly like the original piece. I really embroider for myself and what I think is pretty, which, you know, it's my personal philosophy, but that's how I do it. Okay, so now that I have these wonderful seeds, I'm gonna group them. And then I'm gonna take a look at the strawberry all together. Ta-da! Oh my god, some of this is truly hideous. Like this seed right there. I'm gonna ungroup this for a second. I have to delete this seed. It's just so ugly. It looks kind of diseased right now. I'm very curious how this will turn out when I actually embroider it. So what I'm probably gonna do is I'm just going to stitch out what I have and see how I like it, and then I'll see if I want to change it again. But that gives you the idea, the basic concept of how I would digitize this strawberry. Just a couple of other things. These little leaves here, what I normally do for those is I do a running stitch. And I will make the running stitch as large as possible, which is 0.39 stitches. I pick the color, and then what I do is I start from the bottom, I go up, and I drop individual stitches. And I go back, and I'll literally drop stitches individually so that I can make this fern. And that's usually what I do for all the individual ferns on these things. It just looks better that way to me when you actually stitch it out, which is again the most important thing. How does it look stitched out? Okay, and that's really all I do. So I just kind of do this for the whole image. I very rarely digitize for more than about 30 minutes at a time because I find it kind of like frustrating afterwards. It's not like something I can do all day, every day. So I just do a little bit every single day, and after about a week, you have a full design done, which is really nice. But I would say in general, each design takes me probably about anywhere from about 45 minutes for a really tiny little thing, like a little strawberry or a little single rose, to maybe like 24 hours for the VNA one to digitize, stitch out, fix, digitize, stitch out, fix. Um, and then from there on, turning that single design into a full court suit is probably about another, I would say, at least 12 to 25 hours of digitizing alone, because the machine, your machine and your program will really slow down after about 40,000 stitches. Right now, this design is not even like 10,000 stitches, so it's actually going quite fast. But that being said, the moment you hit about 40,000 stitches, designs do slow down. So I just want to go into the basics of what I do, and I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you found it inspiring to make your own designs as well. If you do, just let me know what you're doing. I'm really excited to see other people who have an interest in this stuff. So thanks again for joining me, guys. Have a good day, and hopefully I'll catch you next time on my channel.